Nusha's life story in 4 seasons.
You as an individual, locally, fill this skeleton in so many different ways.
Hello, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and welcome to the Stream podcast, an unscripted, unedited, free-flowing conversation featuring guests who reject the status quo with a bias for action in the world of water and beyond. My name is Tom Freyberg. I'm an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water.
And I'm Will Sarney, a water strategy advisor and investor doing my part to solve wicked water problems.
Very good. I only introduced myself as Tim, not Tom. Like what does it start? What does it say for the rest of the episode? But we're doing well so far. No edits, remember. So a big thanks to our long-term podcast partner and sponsor, Raymond James, as well as our charity partner, Frank Water, and our many knowledge partners. And we are delighted to welcome back to the stream after a few seasons, Professor Newsha Ajami, the Chief Development Officer for Research, Earth and Environmental Sciences Area for Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. Newsha, welcome back. How
Thanks for
How
having
did I
me.
do on the title? Did I get it right?
Tom, what's the deal? You having a rough day?
Hey, it's the end of a long, long day of meetings here in the UK. So
Okay.
lots of tea, lots of caffeine. We're going to get through this, right? So anyway, Nusha, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me again. And my title is still the same. I'll work on it for next year if you
Yeah,
invite me again.
Oh, yeah,
you're
yeah,
always welcome
always,
back.
always. And in
Thank
fact,
you.
going forward, you could be our only guest. How's that?
Wow,
That's
that
a
would be
commitment.
fun. Yes, that's a huge commitment.
Oh, the stream 2.0.
Yes.
It's a,
Yes.
it's
I
a,
mean, you
it's
guys have so many fun guests and knowledgeable guests. I don't want to take that away from other people.
Oh, no, no, no.
But
Well, we would just expand it.
yeah, we can
it's a
have panel discussions.
yeah. It's like a one guest, one season focus. It's like Nusha, winter, spring, summer, and fall. 4 times.
Wow.
There we
Is that
go.
a movie or something?
That could be a
It,
great
it,
movie.
it,
Yes.
There we go.
it, Nusha's life story in 4 seasons.
Wow. I feel very old though. And
No, no,
full
no, no.
disclosure, I just turned 50. So I feel,
It, it,
that oldness really
it,
weighs on me now.
and Nusha, you look great.
Oh, thank you so much, Phil.
How's
I
that?
was literally about to say, Nusha, you wouldn't have thought you were 50. There we go.
There
See,
we
Wow.
go.
It is the Zoom thing. There's so many
okay.
features.
The
Yes.
the Zoom filter. Yeah, I'm guilty
Yes.
as well. So, all right. Well, let's get going. So, Nusha, you've been very busy as always. You've been working on the Aspen National Water Strategy, developed after 18 months of collaboration, at least. I'm sure it's been longer in kind of gestation and thinking as well with water leaders. Um, I've got a copy of it embargoed ahead of time. So thanks for sharing that with the stream, early access. It's quite comprehensive. It's like over 50 pages. So I thought it'd be good to maybe, because I know when this episode comes out, it will have been published last week. There'll be a lot of talk around it, but maybe give us a bit of context to sort of why a national water strategy and why now.
Yeah, great question, and thanks for covering this. I have been co-leading or co-chairing the Aspen Water Forum with my colleague and friend Martin Doyle for a couple of years. And every time you have one of these, regardless of what it is focused on, and actually Bill has been involved in a couple of those, people come to the meeting, we have all these discussions. Let's talk about, for example, one year it was about ESG, one year was about disaster management, one year was about innovation. And every time people come and say, yeah, all these things are great, but unless we have a national water strategy, many of these things would never happen because we don't have the right benchmarking, or we don't have really a centralized data, or we don't have any standards around how which direction do we need to move, or how we need to sort of change things, or there are no goals in place. And sort of 18 months ago, when actually about 2 years ago, one night I was in DC, and Martin and I, he was also in DC, and we met up, and we were talking about, so what should we have the next national Aspen Water Forum on? And I was like, why not we just actually try to put this national water strategy thing together? Because we get all these thought leaders in the room, we are having all these conversations, but unless we really have this skeleton, this framework, many of these ideas or discussions we are having is never going to go anywhere, because there's no framework or foundation that would sort of give them roots. So that's how this whole conversation started, and that's what we sort of aimed at doing by bringing this team together. Full disclosure, obviously, there's so many thought leaders out there to be involved in such a discussion. You can't have everybody in the room. So we actually really had to put a lot of thought into mapping out the sector, mapping out all the other sectors that relate to water, which you can imagine every other sector touches on water. Trying to think about how we can have the broadest, most diverse representation at the table. So that meant that we can have from every sector or subsector or group one person. And so we had to make a decision. And then, so that's how we ended up putting people together. We were delighted to have Will involved in that. So he was a partner in this crime with us and engaged at the process. And one other thing I say about the process is we divided people to 3 groups because we wanted to make sure we don't have a lot of blind sides. And so we had the original group, the core group that came in. Will was involved in that. So we kind of came up with a set of ideas, created some pillars around how we want to organize ourselves. And then we brought in the second group that came in and said, oh, you totally missed this thing, or you did not touch on this part, or you did not discuss this topic. So they came, basically, they were the second group that came in and sort of test run the ideas and provided some feedback. And then we had the third group coming into the Water Forum in October, and they actually had a chance to again poke holes into the ideas that were presented. So we try to be thoughtful and be open to have an open process through which we can actually have the right set of strategies in place.
Newsha, as I reflect back, and I think you heard me say this, I really thought the process was so well designed and thoughtful, and the voices that came together were much more diverse than any group of water practitioners, however you want to define it, I've been exposed to. And that in itself, that was incredibly valuable to hear all these voices come in on the topic in a way that made it very constructive and I would say very positive. And, I'm a little biased, but I think it's a great body of work. And, initially I was like, well, how's this going to work? How do you do this? And, just a shout out, it was really, really well designed as a process. And I found it to be invaluable in terms of hearing those voices and, making some new friends, in the world of water, which is always a good thing. So
100%. Yes.
well done.
And I appreciate that. Thank you. I always, I personally believe process is always the most important part of any product, like whatever, or an organization or whatever you do, because process is where you actually sort of mark the outcome. If depending on how you set it up, you can have a very good outcome, medium outcome, or not a very good outcome. So I think that's very important.
So you've I was taking a look at the report, and you've identified sort of 6 different interconnected strategies. We won't list them all now in the podcast. We'll kind of share it as part of the promotion. But I noticed that the one at the end, accelerate the adoption of innovative water solutions at scale, kind of, it's not just about technology, right? Or solutions or innovations that need to be part of this fix. It's so much more than that. So can you kind of give a bit more flavor of kind of the scale of what this strategy is looking at?
Yeah, so often when you talk about the water sector, everybody focuses on the fact that it's not innovative, things are not really moving, which is absolutely true. Um, but the challenge, again, going back to the comment about process,
Mm,
is that if you don't have the right process in place, which is kind of, think about it in the water sector, for example, it's the governance structure, policies, institutions, financial tools that you have, you don't end up taking up some of these innovative solutions that are out there. If things are working, why would you break them, right?
Hmm.
If the policies are promoting certain outcomes or certain solutions, they're there, let them go. If the money or budgets or funding and finances are set up in a way that only promotes conventional and what we have in place already promotes to rebuild them or keep building the same things, you're never going to get, maybe here and there some innovative solutions get in, but not as often. Or if we actually, another piece of this is permitting, for example. If we permit the same way, if we measure everything the same way, the same solution is going to help you get where you want to go. So often it's not lack of innovative solutions or technologies that is stopping us from moving forward. It's lack of right processes that create space for new ideas to come in. And that's not just at this moment we are in, this is for the future as well, right? And if
Hmm.
you think in the past, the way some of the newer ideas have made their way in any sector, including water sector, was because we changed the way we do things. For example, in the US, we passed Clean Water Act about 50 years ago, and that actually created space for some of the solutions that we have around treatment, managing wastewater or drinking water, higher quality drinking water. Some of those technologies made their way into the sector because of that piece of legislation and piece of policy that we had. So that's why I think innovation is very important. We should keep investing in it, but innovation by itself as a technology innovation is not going to change um, things that we want.
It, Nusha, it just, for the portion that I was involved with, it struck me that that issue came up very, very early. It was not the mantra of, oh, we just need more money and we need one more innovation platform. It was a recognition that there's actually a lot of money out there and there's no shortage of ideas, but how do you take the friction out of it
Yes.
and either, help something get to commercial scale or kill it early? I thought that was refreshing that it was not the same narrative and
Yeah,
people,
absolutely.
yeah.
A- And I think that goes back to what you said earlier on diversity of people who were in the room. There were people who actually really, technologists or,
Hmm.
investors who always see the progress in the sector through that lens of if only people pick up this technology, or if only people we can implement this thing, right? But a lot of the innovation in the public policy space or the governance space gets overlooked, right? But
Hmm.
that's where sort of you start this engine and make this car moving. Then you can pick up all the pieces as you go. But if we don't have that innovation in the public policy, if we don't change, we do if the sort of in business models or how we finance things or how we set up our institutions, some of these technologies never see the daylight.
Right.
There was a section in the report that talked a big section on sort of governance and in terms of having a governance crisis. So can you talk a bit about, because I think it's amazing, like, as you both described, the process, the diversity of thought, the stakeholders, and the kind of the roadmap. But ultimately, governance is going to be a big kind of make or break on some of the changes that need to happen. So, can you talk about maybe at the federal and the local level how you see this, Nusha, and the kind of balance that needs to be made to drive this change?
Yeah, I mean, It is interesting because at the beginning, I mean, we had people in the room who recognized governance is super important. And at the beginning, and Will might remember, um, everybody wanted to put everything under governance. As soon as we started the governance section, it was like, oh, this is governance, and put that one under governance, and we need to do this. And like everybody wanted to like keep or blow up different parts of the governance structure in the water sector, and everybody thought that's the most important thing. So we ended up having billion different ideas under governance and very little ideas under everything else. And then we had to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, this is governance, but this is not governance, right? I think, again, governance is super important because if you think, what is a governance, right? You have the institutional setups, the institutions, the way we function, operational process, all the people, the structure, all that is part of the governance structure. And obviously the way it's set up, for example, for water sector, let's just focus only on water, even not thinking about other sectors that are touching on water. We have divided water into water, wastewater, and flood management, right? And then we keep talking about how when it's flooding, we have to figure out how to use that water to recharge that groundwater to become source of water for the future, or stormwater as a source of water. But if you have 3 buckets, right, and people are only thinking about filling those buckets and their budgets are set that way, if their mission is set that way, it's very, very difficult to make them work together. They're not incentivized to work together. And at the same time, not just not they're not incentivized, they're required to work within the boundaries that are set, put their money the way it has to go, right? So that recognition was very important. Another piece of the governance, which we thought is super, super important is, and this is not only in the US, but many of these, political boundaries and natural boundaries don't fall on each other, right? People fight over water because we totally ignored the natural boundaries, right? We just basically draw these lines and said, this is mine and that's yours.
Right.
And nature doesn't understand boundaries, right? So nature functions as if one whole system. So the whole thinking basin level and regional governance was part of this sort of saying that we can't continue on thinking as independent political entities and political regions while fighting over who has access to the natural resources and how do we manage it in a way that can benefit everyone rather than this zero-sum game we have created. Because when you draw these political boundaries, it becomes zero-sum game. Because for me, it's all about how I enable my state, my community, my people, right?
Well, we're seeing that in the Colorado right now. It's,
100%.
A friend of mine said, there are a bunch of people in a room that are, just hell bent on ensuring that they don't give up a gallon. And they keep going back to a document that's 100 years old and was wrong at the time. Like,
Right.
how beautiful is that as a guiding principle for, allocation? Yeah, it was wrong. It's over 100 years old and it's mine. And yeah,
Especially if it works for me, right?
right.
If those numbers are good for me, I'm just going to fight
Right.
as long as I can to keep them.
Exactly. So Nusha, it's a little bit of a divergence here, but where in the world is water managed in a way that recognizes that there are, hydrologic boundaries, and that should be, so going back to Powell and mapping, you
Right.
know, hydraulic basins as a way to define political boundaries. I mean, you do a lot of work globally. Is there any
I
place that
don't
gets it right?
I don't think so, but I would say, at least I don't know. I'm sure there are places, but I would say I have seen a lot more coordination across Europe around
Mm,
water bodies. For example, the way Rhine River is managed, It goes across different boundaries. They do have to coordinate across the board, across borders, and figure out how do you manage water quality upstream to make sure the water quality downstream is protected, or like the
Hmm.
flows and everything. So there is a little bit of coordination in that way. But I don't necessarily think when we drew a lot of these um, political boundaries, I don't think we really had a good understanding. And some of these, I mean, these countries are much older, right? We're not talking about 200 years, we're talking about thousands of years in some cases,
Right.
right? So at the time, there was not tons of first of all, there wasn't tons of demand on our natural resources, and there wasn't a lot of recognition of how our behavior upstream impacts downstream or all that. And there wasn't, and the political boundaries were set before we had a very good understanding of this. But I would be
Hmm.
very curious, to be honest with you, and interested to know if there are models out there that potentially demonstrate a better outcome.
Yeah, I'm going to look into that. It just hit me that
Yeah,
there's got to be some place where,
yeah.
that is the guiding principle, the construct, to get people to think differently about managing a common pool resource. But yeah, sorry for taking it off in a totally different direction, but it
I
was a
think that's an
trigger for
excellent question, though. I think
it.
that's such an important question, and it's worth definitely looking into.
Hmm.
Um, but again, I think if you think about it, if you go beyond the modern world we live in, there were tribes that were gathering around water bodies, right? So
Hmm.
whatever tribe you had around water body, they would just like manage that resource for their own benefit, right? So I think, and that those tribes had grown into communities, then had grown into,
Hmm.
fought and I mean, they're not going to go through the historical process, but if
Hmm.
you think about how the political boundaries are set, has a lot of it had to do with like wars and fighting over land and all that. It wasn't tons about you know, where's the source of this water and where does it go, kind of a thing. So
Hmm.
It's an interesting question, though, right? And I think we should put a wider call out for anyone who has examples of
It,
who actually, from a transboundary point of
yes,
view, gets it right. Because I think it's if you take it as a wider question, is who gets water right in terms of management, in terms of authorities. The one international case that always gets referenced is Singapore, but it's quite a unique example
oh
because it's
yeah,
almost an
it,
island state. It's
it,
connected to Malaysia.
it,
It's
it
a single authority, single water authority that now has grown responsibility for coastal waters as well. So it's beyond water, wastewater supply.
right.
But I think it's such a unique example because if you
It,
compare it to the breakup of multiple utilities in the UK, which is a very small island compared to the US, you still can't compare the two because you have different areas,
yeah.
different boundaries, different governance, different regulations.
It,
So the Singapore example is amazing, and kudos to PUB and what they've built as a hydro hub. But it's kind of a bit of an anomaly in terms of
oh yeah.
water management, right?
It, it's like a space station. And one thing I would add is yes, you should post it, and I'm confident one of our millions of viewers will know the answer to that question, Tom.
yeah, that would be great. One thing I would say about Singapore, though, um, actually, a lot of the things you see happen in Singapore was related to water, partly
Hmm.
because their water comes from Malaysia,
Mm.
right? So they are dependent on that watershed as well. So they had to do everything they can to create water security within what they have access to. So it is interesting to see how water becomes a national security issue, right? And in that country, it is a national security issue, and it's sort of um, ignited all this action, which
Mm.
is unique and that's fascinating to watch because
Hmm.
um, they had to make sure they have enough water to be able to fuel the economy, which is sort of
It,
what we sort of touched on here as well. If
Mm.
water
right.
becomes a national security, so your decision making changes totally.
Nusha, when you were launching this and designing it, I imagine you had to make the case that we need a national water strategy, and examples like Singapore showed up as this is what it could look like. I mean, even though it's a, vastly different scale
Yeah.
and
Mm.
unique,
Mhm.
characteristics and so on. What was that conversation like, in terms of, hey, I have an idea, this is why it's important, and, let's get some funding, and this is the design process. So can you talk about the genesis a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Obviously, there is a lot of awareness around countries that have this sort of top-down model around water, and they have this national water. Water is a national security issue for them, and that definitely always um, shows up very quickly. The challenge is, the model we have, and we hear this all the time, water is local. And everybody talks about water
Hmm.
is local, right? But then when it comes to protecting water, and enabling everybody to have access to water, these arguments quickly break down because yes, water is local, but in what way? If water is local from the lens of economic growth, that's where you start sort of losing sight of long-term water sustainability. So what
Hmm.
we saw in this discussion, but I mean, we sort of started sort of highlighting and maybe sort of incentivize us to do this is, everybody always thought groundwater or water scarcity is very much of a Western water issue for the US,
Right,
right? But then just a couple of years ago, New York Times had this article around groundwater that showed that has not, I mean, yes, Western US has a lot of water scarcity issues, no doubt. But groundwater is declining everywhere in the US
right,
in ways that we had actually never tracked. And that shows you that, okay, maybe it's much more acute in the Western US, but it is a national issue. And unless we really have some proper guardrails and proper framework around monitoring, benchmarking, understanding who
hmm
takes what, how, in what way, right? We will never manage them, even at the local level. You need to have some, the way I think about it, and I don't know if people like it, but this is how I think about this. And I learned this when I worked for the legislature in California, like many, many years ago. There's a skeleton. Everybody has 206, I believe, bones in their body, right? It sets up your skeleton, majority of people. And then how you fill it just depends. And the details comes to local, right? You as an individual locally, fill this skeleton in so many different ways,
right.
right? The same, you have muscles and everything, but like the size, the color, the form, the shape, everything is different. So if that skeleton is not there, you cannot create that frame. So this is providing that framework that you can then fill in different ways. So
I love that. I mean, really, that is such a accessible way to talk about why a strategy and also honor that there's great flexibility based on local conditions and other issues that are important. It gets back to language is important.
language
How do you
very much is
explain
important.
how
Yeah.
do you explain
Mm.
this to the layperson? And
Did you see
I
the
like it.
yeah, I echo your thoughts, Will. I think the skeleton analogy is great in terms of getting the kind of framework in place to then build layers upon that. Did you see the report that came out a few weeks ago from the UN on water bankruptcy as a
I,
phrasing and terminology, and how the kind of groundwater is seen as the savings account, surface water is seen as your checking account, and actually we're using both too quickly and we're kind of getting into the state of water bankruptcy. And I posted something on it, and LinkedIn doing its thing, people were kind of not they're just kind of like, okay, it's another marketing phrase, we've called it water scarcity, we've called it drought, water bankruptcy. But I actually thought the analogy between kind of tying it into day-to-day finances was quite understandable for like the general public, right? Because you would
Yeah, I
understand that. You
mean,
would say, okay, you have your day-to-day account, you have your savings account,
yeah,
your credit card, and we've been,
yeah.
effectively using our resources for too long. But yeah, I just wanted to, if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole saving account, checking account is not
Mm-hmm.
a new idea.
Right,
Many of us have
right.
been talking about this forever. And partly because, especially people in the Western US that are dealing with groundwater decline, that's a greatest analogy because
Right.
it's not your It's not your salary that fills in your checking account every month. It's more like what you put aside is your 401k kind of a
Right,
thing,
right, right.
right? And that's the simplest thing you can way because people don't understand groundwater. It's invisible, it's out
Mm,
there.
mm,
They don't know what does that mean? How does it look like? So they can't really relate to it. And I think the whole saving account and groundwater, connecting groundwater to saving account is a great analogy. I would say it's not just a groundwater thing. It's even surface water. If you don't really
Mhm.
manage your, rivers properly and over allocate it, Colorado River, a great example of that,
Right.
or all the dams. What are the dams? They're actually sort of your, I think that going deep into that analogy, I'm not saying it's a good idea, but just like going deep into it, you can divide it in so many different ways, right? Your saving account and for your 401k, your this. And you can see that very quickly, um, things start not looking bad. Again, going back to Colorado River, we've over allocated this in so many different ways that we don't even get that much money. We are running on credit at this point,
mm.
Yeah.
right?
It, the Colorado's interesting that you bring it up. I think a few months ago, there was like this aha moment where I don't know if it was all of the states, but some of the states, and it might have been driven by Nevada, that said, we need to acknowledge that the supply side of the equation ain't what it used to be.
Yeah.
And then we slice up the pie as opposed to, well, there's this old document that said I get this, but if it's not there, you can't get it. And
Yeah.
I I found it tragically amusing that
Yeah, I mean,
like
if you wanted to do it now, well, wouldn't you do it on percentage? I'll
Uh,
give Bill 1% of Colorado water. If it's a gallon, it's a 1% of a gallon. If it's
right. It
100,000 gallons, it's a one. That's
it
how we do a lot of things because percentage at least acknowledges there's uncertainty and
it
variability.
absolutely agree with you. I mean, that would still irritate the heck out of, certain states
Sure,
that'll be unnamed,
sure.
but it's a lot more sensible. It is,
Yeah.
if I only have a gallon, even though that document said I get, a
Two
slice of two
gallons.
gallons, right? It's like it doesn't exist,
It
it's
doesn't exist. What
magical.
are we fighting for, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, for example, a national, I mean, not that's not what they say here, but like a national water strategy can be a lot of these water rights can go back to the table and be more about creating proportional rights rather than actual rights,
Right.
because we cannot
It,
dictate how nature behaves. So, we actually do need to acknowledge that and figure out how we do this. Right. And we do this all the time. If you think about it, I mean, again, using the financial analogy is, you get a certain percentage of whatever you invest in, right? They don't tell you you put $2, then you're going to get $2, right? It grows and changes based on what is
I, it,
available.
my financial manager said I would get back everything at
Everything.
100%
Yes.
return.
Yes.
So, um,
but all investments under your own risk. Yeah, classic. So Nusha, to kind of bring us home and wrap things up, then tell us you've got this amazing process, amazing diverse group of stakeholders finalized in this strategy document. In an ideal world, what's the kind of the next stage of the process for the adoption, for making sure the right people at the federal and the local level see this? Yeah, talk us through the kind of the roadmap for the coming months.
Yeah, so the idea is to put this out there as a living document, which means that obviously this is what we as a group put together and recognized. We do recognize there are others with other ideas that can come in and enhance this, add to it, and that's open. And then also we want to create a campaign around it because we try to get to the most fundamental things. There are strategy documents out there, but they're all very much related to one specific subsector. For example, utilities have their own strategy, or ag has its own strategy. Here, we're trying to kind of be a lot more wholesome, be that skeleton rather than just focus on your specialty, which is your hand, the whatever doctor you want to think about. So our goal is to put this out there, engage with a broad set of groups that are working on water or need water as part of their supply chain, or think of water because they have to manage states or cities or communities, and then create a campaign around this to kind of give it another life to and we hope that some of these ideas will get picked up by different states, different communities, and as you looked at it, you saw that we are not super prescriptive because the goal is to have this as a document that can live beyond 2 years. So somebody comes back. That's why we don't mention specific solutions. There were actually some requests, put water reuse in there or put this in there. And we took them all out because we're like, again, this is about process, not an individual idea, right? So kind of giving it a life beyond immediate actions and having it as a guiding document that can go beyond like just short-term reactions and responses.
I don't know if you've seen this. He's an Egyptian author on AI called Mo Gawdat. Used to work at Google Labs, I think, or Google X. And he gave a keynote speech in the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. And I don't know if you've seen any of his podcasts, but it's not the most optimistic listening. He kind of talks a little bit about the dangers of AI, but something he said stuck with me. It's like,
great.
When it comes to I'm going to bring it around. Don't worry. He said some of the answers we don't know what they are in terms of the sustainability challenge, climate change, carbon. He said, and that's the hope of what AI can deliver. And I think when you then mentioned the strategy doesn't like stipulate or be too prescriptive on the solutions, I think what could be mind-blowing is it's a living document. It's not fixated on certain solutions. And there are things that will come along in the future that could well be plugged into this, right? Because we don't have all the answers right now. But it just suddenly thought when he mentioned that, it's like we think we have all the solutions, but actually the beauty of AI, to be optimistic, is it will come up with answers that we haven't even thought about or come up with new materials. So, and it's probably the same in terms of innovations within policies, within technologies that will come along in years to come that could well find a place in this document, right? So,
I mean, if you think about it, for example, we have one sort of tactic or sub strategy focus area in here that talks about how do we need to think across sectors in order to move forward when it comes to resilience. So, for example, we built energy solutions right now, thinking about water abundance. We build water solutions right now, thinking about energy abundance. People come up with all sort of carbon mitigation solutions without thinking about water or energy implications of that, right? We think in silos. I mean, even we think in silos within the water sector, but also we think in silos outside of the water sector, right? So if you create, for example, when we talk about the basin plan or coordinating around a basin, all of a sudden you reduce your scale of operation, then you have an opportunity to think across sectors rather than being stuck in one. And that by itself can be revolutionary. Because then if I'm part of a community and I'm putting together a bunch of solutions around water, energy, and carbon, maybe I can think about which one can be feedstock to another one. The waste from one can be a value for the other one. And how can I create this circular economy? But you cannot create circular economy at scale if you start at scale. You actually do need to go to the basics, to the small regions or basins, and then build up like a Lego rather than one big structure.
I like that thinking a lot. I'm really excited about like this phase of this. I mean, really excited, having those conversations with very specific stakeholder groups and seeing how the body gets built. And analogy. So
Yeah.
kudos. It was just absolutely a fabulous experience, Nusha. Um,
Thank
Yeah,
really
you. I
fabulous.
learned a lot personally.
kudos for bringing it all together. All the different
Yeah,
parties, stakeholders of the process, and it's quite refreshing to kind of, I think, hear about such an ambitious strategy document without stipulating the answers or the solutions. Right? It's
yeah.
it's
Yes.
way more than the technology.
It,
So, yeah, well done on bringing it together, and good luck with the kind of next phase.
it,
We'll link to it from the stream and amplify the efforts and try and help you get it in front of as many people as possible. So.
Thank you. Thank you. And let me know if you hear from someone on the, um, an example of how a region or a community or a group
it,
or country has figured out the basin planning
Yeah, we'll
or
definitely sort
basin
of
scale work, planning.
put a call out for that. So,
Yeah.
Nusha, always good to see you. Thanks so
it,
much. And look, we were pretty serious for the duration of that
it,
podcast, right?
We
That
did
was
very
we
well.
brought
I
it back
know.
round.
it,
So,
is really my only serious moment all week. So thank you, both of you.
No, thank you for, amplifying this. Thank you for covering it. Always fun to share ideas with you two and be part of the conversation. It's definitely
It's
a
great.
highlight of my every few years.
That's great. All right, we'll rectify that, Nusha.
That sounds good. But thanks for covering this. We really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. All
amazing,
right.
great stuff.
Good,
Thanks so much,
good to
Nusha.
see
Good to
you
see you.
both.
Thank you. Good to see you both.
Bye.